You're listening to Building the Future, a podcast by Kadans Science Partner. And my name is Rudy van Beurden. In this podcast, I meet innovators, trailblazers, and bright minds who are busy building the future. Your next doctor will be a robot. Well, if you think this is a far-fetched idea, you'd better keep listening. Today, we're discussing the statement with three visionaries who have some outspoken opinions about this topic. Experts who are working in the field on a daily basis and know everything about technology in healthcare and its potential. And we've picked an appropriate location to discuss this topic, the Novio Tech campus in Nijmegen. Well, here we are having three guests surrounding me at this very table. Right next to me, Jasmijn Kok. You are co-founder of the spin-off Juno Perinatal Healthcare, if I'm correct, working with some colleagues on it. Next to you is Bram de Beer, system architect at Eindhoven Medical Robotics, actually, that's it. And Roel Boumans, researcher, Behavioral Science Institute, the BSI of the Radboud University, here in Nijmegen. A warm welcome to all of you. And we were speaking about the weather already, didn't we, Bram? Because you came here by car without an air conditioning, and it's quite warm already outside.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, a warm welcome. I would like to kick it off just like we do in other episodes of this Building the Future podcast, and that's by mentioning the statement, and then first and foremost, take your views on it. So the statement is, your next doctor will be a robot. What do you think, Jasmijn?
I agree.
You do agree.
I think that the human mind is only capable of so much. You have to learn everything you do by experience and see patterns. And doctors nowadays, they go to seminars and they learn from each other. But I think that with the technology we have today, we can combine the knowledge of humans and of data and then provide better healthcare.
Fair enough. That's already an argument. Let's continue quickly to Bram before he swifts his mind. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree?
So I disagree with the statement that definitely the next doctor will be a robot because, well, the next doctor, we're not there yet in technology to actually do this. It would be very nice to combine everything, but we as a company also concentrate way more on building tools that allow surgeons to become better at their jobs and to perform almost impossible surgeries.
Yeah, but the surgeon, the doctor, him or herself will always be there in your view. Yeah. And what about the Roel?
Yes, I disagree too with this statement. I think that doctors play an important role, especially for the psychology of the patients themselves. They would like to be sure that they are in the hands of a capable doctor. So for the very far future to come, I think that physical or that robots will play a supporting role, but the ultimate decision will always be with a human doctor.
Right, fair enough. To stay with you, Roel, you have a lot of experience as well with experiments in which robots played a key role. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
What we have done is that we have looked at some administrative activities that healthcare professionals often do, like taking questionnaires from patients. So we asked patients a lot of questions with a robot, and we asked them, well, how do you feel about this? And it turned out that most patients really like to have a robot interviewing them. Also, if it's more beneficial for them because the doctor in the end will have more time for him to discuss their ultimate concerns. Mm-hmm. And then the more administrative tasks you can give to the robot.
Mm-hmm. And this, if I'm correct, is done by the Pepper robot, isn't it?
Yes.
Being done in some hospitals here in Nijmegen, and that's a portable robot. So the robot actually moves around.
Yeah, it's a humanoid robot of 1 meter 20 high and 26 kilos, and it has a very friendly appearance, and that is what appeals to many people, especially the older adults, and these are the group where we focused on, and we found that they even thought that doctors who were supported by robots give better care than doctors who were not supported by robots.
Fair enough.
But still, in the end, they want to have a human face.
Yeah. The guest here around the table might have some extra questions for you as well. We will come back to you, Roel, but maybe across the table, Bram, you are also working on robotics, but it's actually quite some different robotics, isn't it?
Yes, this is a completely different robot, because where the Pepper robot is, of course, a humanoid, we focus way more on actually performing an operation. So we are not interviewing patients, we are operating on patients, and that requires a completely different robot. Because it goes from, relatively low tech with a lot of psychology to very high tech and a lot of precision that is necessary. So completely different field.
It's real high precision surgeons, actually. Surgeons are using these robots to deliver.
Yes. So we operate on the skull for now. We are venturing into other parts of the body as well. But for now, we are in the skull, where, of course, precision is key, because there are so many important structures there, and we don't want to hit any of those.
Yeah. And similar to Jasmijn, you have an entrance into the field of health in another way. You, at heart, are really a die-hard engineer, if I may say so. You've worked with Google and with CERN internationally, but now you really venture into the healthcare world, as well as Jasmijn did, because you did something completely different. But now you co-founded this spin-off. Can you tell us and the listeners something about what it is what you are doing?
Of course. So our spin-off, Juno Perinatal Healthcare, is connected to a research done by a European consortium. So we are working together with universities in Milan and Aachen, for example, to build the next couveuse. In English it's called NICU. What we do is we make an artificial womb. We create an environment that simulates as much as possible the mother's womb, in order to increase the healthcare for extremely preterm born infants. And extremely preterm means younger than 28 weeks. And currently the data on these, the healthcare for these babies, it's not so great. So each year 800,000 babies are born extremely preterm worldwide, and of these babies in the Netherlands, 50% dies, and of the 50% that does survive, 1/3 only is healthy, and 2/3 has some sort of handicap. And it's mainly caused by brain injury that's caused by not enough oxygen, because the babies, they're forced to breathe in air, but their lungs aren't developed enough yet. And because they can't breathe yet, but they are forced to in the current system, their health isn't the best start for them to begin their journey into life. And that is what we try to resolve with our artificial womb.
Yeah. So now we're getting to know the three of you a little bit better. You've got three totally different perspectives on the field of health, working on various aspects as well. But Jasmijn, maybe for you, what is your personal motivation to dive into this very specific team?
Well, it's actually, data-driven. I saw the numbers of healthcare of the past 10 years for the extremely preterm born, and I didn't see any progress. And what I'm really interested in is complex projects that can actually have an impact on healthcare. And what this consortium is doing is a Moonshot project. It's super complex. A lot of expertise is required. There's a lot of risk that we will fail, actually. And that is very interesting to me. So that's why I joined the project.
Because you do like a challenge.
I definitely do.
Yeah. It sounds like it, definitely. And then getting back to the statement, your next doctor is a robot. Jasmijn, you were the only one saying, yes, I actually do agree. And you mentioned maybe artificial intelligence or combined wisdom or knowledge.
Yes, something that the university in Eindhoven that we also work with is investigating is the digital twin. And I'm really curious what the other experts might have to say about that. But what we do is we make actually a digital version of our patient, which is the baby. And that version combined with data of the population in the rest of the world, we use that to help doctors to make decisions. So we also have a physical model, which is a 3D printed baby, a mannequin, and it is connected to that digital twin. And that physical model we use to train the doctors. So sure, it's quite a bold statement to say that your next doctor will be a robot, and it's easy for me to say because I don't work with the robots and you do. But still, I do really believe that the way that we make decisions, that doctors make decisions now, and for example, to do a C-section instead of a natural birth, that is just not efficient enough yet, and I do believe a robot could do better.
Who wants to respond?
Well, a digital twin is a very interesting development, I think, because then you can try to make a personalized image of a patient. And the challenge for me would be in which part of the patient are you modeling in detail and where you take more a global approach. I think if, for example, the lungs are the biggest problem, then how do you model the lungs, and perhaps the rest you can keep aside for the moment, for example. And then these natural complexes processes are very complex. So I also think that they are stochastically challenging because you don't know exactly which way they will go. So it's very interesting development, I think.
Is this something super new in the health space? Because I did hear about it in the construction world. So whenever they have to build a new bridge, they first make a 3D model, which is called a digital twin, and then they test, and then they put in new materials and all that. But is this something entirely new?
So digital twins are indeed just simulations. They have been around since we could build simulations. And doing this for a human is of course interesting, but the question becomes, what are you doing in detail and what are you basically doing in broad strokes? Because you can't simulate everything in detail. There's simply not enough computing power or, well, the ability to program that. So even though it is very interesting technology, we are not at a point where we can say it's mature enough to use it as an actual decision maker for what we want to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
What we actually do in Eindhoven is we will use it. And the reason why is that for us it's very hard to test on these infants. For us, it must be actually the first time right. It's like building a rocket when going to the moon. So the actual reason why we are using this digital twin is to make sure that we can test our device before we can actually use it. And yes, we will need clinical trials, of course. But still, to prevent as much as possible to have to use animals or actual human beings with testing, this is partly why we use this. And it isn't perfect, it's correct, and we will focus on the most important parts, for example, the heart and the lungs, to simulate that. But yeah, for us it's not science fiction anymore that we can actually use it to test and to develop medical devices.
It's very interesting also because with control theory, you already try often to control difficult processes by having a model of these processes and using the output of this model to steer your original process. So if you have your patient and you have the model of the patient and you see that the model of the patient does something different than the patient, how do you use that feedback to change the parameters in the womb?
Yeah, and that is definitely correct. And also for us, it's the question how much can you use this system, because there isn't so much data yet on externally preterm born because they're in the mother, so you can't take actual measurements so well. So we'll actually have to wait until we can use the device to measure because when there is a baby in the womb, you can measure much easily, and then you can use that data to also help mothers while the baby is still in there, because you know what's going on. So, but that's long term.
Yeah. One day you will get there. So the technology, things should be viable and things can grow, obviously. But also hospitals, and even more important, maybe patients have a certain opinion about new technologies. Roel, can you tell us a little bit about the introduction of the Pepper robot and how people reacted to that? Were they all happy, or?
Yeah, well, first we tried it with healthy older adults who were still living at home. So we didn't want to test first with more vulnerable patients at the clinic. And already they said, well, if I would be admitted to the hospital, I think a robot like Pepper would be a good idea to have him ask me questions, if that saves time for the healthcare professionals. And later we tried the same with patients at the outpatient clinic, and there we measured the same results.
Yeah. Also with some elderly patients, wasn't it?
Also with older adults, people above 70 years of age.
Yeah,
yes.
And they were actually quite open to it, if I'm correct. But their children, who were a little bit younger, they said, well, you're not going to use a robot on my mother or on my father.
Exactly. They were often more concerned than their parents. Yes, that's true.
The parents said, just bring it on and let's see what it will bring.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, back to Bram, because you're also, the highly robotics, like the precision tools, they are around for a little while already. And in your case, the patient sometimes doesn't even realize what's going on because maybe he's fast asleep, obviously.
I hope so, yes.
Yeah. But then the people who use them, they benefit heavily, isn't it? The surgeons using the equipment.
Yeah, so depending on the robot you built for surgery, of course, there's a big difference in the different types of robots. But yes, there is a huge benefit for the surgeon. So in our case, one of our surgeries is an 8.5-hour surgery, which is sometimes performed by two surgeons, one doing the actual drilling of the bone to reach the operating area, then one doing the removal of the tumor, which this operation is for. But there are also countries and hospitals where this is performed by one surgeon. Meaning that surgeon is busy for 8.5 hours, and the first about 4 hours are very boring but also very tedious bone drilling, and it makes their fingers go numb and things like that. So our robot steps in and takes over that first very tedious part, does it faster but at the same accuracy, and then of course the surgeon is still fresh to go into the much more complex and much more precise part of the operation from their point of view. Of course, the first part is not supposed to harm the patient, but the second part, where you remove a tumor, that becomes so close to the brain and to the nerves and things like that, that it is actually very, very risky to do that when you are not at your full performance at that point.
Mm-hmm. So in your case, you should know everything, obviously, about the physical surroundings and what such an expert needs. Well, Roel, if I'm correct, you focus more on the psychological aspect as well, the well-being, maybe even before there will be surgery or medication or whatsoever.
Yes, that's a big part.
Yeah, but Bram, how do you get to that knowledge? As being an engineer, you step into that world, you want to build a robot. How do you interact with these experts? How do you
you talk to them and you look at the operations. So you go to an operating room and you see what's going on. The first time, it's all chaos. You won't make sense of anything that's happening. But at some point, you will learn what the operation is, and you will see that sometimes they have trouble with certain parts of the operation. And you try to solve those. So you try to discuss with them, why do you do this in a certain way? And most of the time, the answer is just, that's what I'm taught. This is what my professor or the doctor I learned from, this is what they told me to do, and so this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And yeah, we try to look at that from a technology point of view, which is optimize it, see where you can improve, and then actually improve it.
Yeah, definitely. I do understand such an answer, because you do not want a doctor who is improvising every single day, time and again, obviously. So obviously he or her is following a protocol.
Sorry, could I maybe just ask one more question? Because you mentioned the second part was the more difficult, precise one. Wouldn't you want that part to be done by a robot then?
That would be ideal. The problem is that so we have to steer a robot with something. We currently use CT images to do that. CT images, of course, being 3D X-rays. And we can only see the bone on that. More importantly, even if we could see the rest with an MRI scan, for example, the rest can move. So the robot has no eyes, so it can't see when it's moving. So we have to then assume that things are on a certain spot in the space. And if they move, then that becomes a problem. Obviously, you would want that second part to also be performed by a robot, but it has to be a very precise robot that knows exactly what it's doing. And currently, that's just outside of the scope of possibilities of what we can do with robotics.
But if we fast forward 5 years?
You meant 25 years?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, yes.
Then
at some point there will be enough progress that you can do these things, yes.
Yeah. Jasmijn, in your field of research now, and as well as validating because you actually were subsidized, if I'm correct, and it runs until 2024?
Yes. So we have a deadline.
Yeah.
2024, then we should have a prototype that works. We promised that, and we have to do that. So we will. And then we want to start the preclinical, clinical trials and certification processes and production. That's all in the future still, but we are planning about. That's why we are already looking at market research, at next rounds of funding, because we really want our research to reach the market, and because it takes a lot of time, and also a lot of preparing the society for this. This is something we are already working on parallel to the currently quite fundamental still research. But our timeline would be 2030 to have a product that could actually be used and in hospitals to help extremely preterm-borns to have a better chance of survival and healthy life.
And where do you start in entering the market? Who do you speak to? Where do you go to? Coming up with the idea of an artificial womb, it's like, wow, it's futuristic.
Actually, the idea came from a gynecologist in our research group. He has been working for, I think, the past 50 years on this topic. And he was still in college when he saw on a congress a little goat underwater. And the goat was actually growing in the outside womb or an artificial womb. And that experiment didn't go so well, but we have increased our research and we have much better results now. But that is actually where the moment where the idea arose to start this. And we now received the 3 million 2020 Horizon 2020 funds to get our consortium together, to have all the expertise in-house, to work on the prototype, and then to, in 2030, deliver something that can be used for patients.
And you actually want to optimize that time in the womb, whether it be artificial, and in the preparations for this very talk, you even said, well, it can be even longer than 40 weeks, because you're not limited to the physical measurements of the mother.
I did say that to trigger you a little bit.
All right.
Because
now it's here.
we are bound by regulations in different countries, and in the countries, the regulations and law they differ. For example, I gave the example of a patient of this gynecologist being transferred to Germany, because there they were allowed to help the extremely preterm born, and in the Netherlands the rule is that under 24 weeks old you cannot help a baby, so it's considered a miscarriage or just a dead baby. And in Germany you are able to help. So those are the laws and restrictions that we work within. But if you just set them aside, why wouldn't you leave the infant in and maybe have it for 46 weeks? Because we are bound by the size of the mother's hips, so to say. And perhaps if you take that aside, it would be healthier to do that. But again, we are not doing that.
All right, clear enough. Roel, you're working as a researcher within the Radboud University, and we were talking about various robots or robotics. What else do you see entering the hospital anytime soon?
I also see more like the virtual agents, like the virtual robots, which you have on a screen, and there you can talk to, and they talk back, just like robots. Robots, the physical versions are a way the computer is built. But you can also use the same software to use a virtual avatar, and that may also be a very convenient way. There are differences because the social presence of a physical robot is very much different from a virtual agent. But in certain situations, it may very well be that it's much more convenient for a person to have such virtual agents next to a person's bed. For example, to be informed about his medicine, when you need to take them, about the surgery which is upcoming, or the results of that, or anything which happens during the course of his stay in the hospital, which he has not been able to ask his healthcare professionals or others.
Are there actually guidelines, or is there policy within the hospital of like, this is what we're going to enter, or this is what we want to leave outside of the door?
Well, you have, of course, medical device guidelines, and people have to, device developers have to meet these guidelines, these requirements. So these are there, yes. Mm-hmm. But other than that, these are also subject to change, like laws are subject to change. I mean, if we are now talking about 24 weeks, why in 5 years not about 22 weeks? Yeah. People change, technology change. So I think if the knowledge is acceptable and without much risk for the patients, then I think we can go further.
Yeah. This is, without saying it, it has to do with ethical views, obviously, on health and on basic rights, on human rights, on improvement, on getting better, actually. What are your thoughts about it, Bram and Jasmijn? The ethical aspect, is it something that you take into consideration, or you just build whatever that is possible?
Of course, we are also limited by the MDR, the regulations that are there for medical devices. We definitely take it into account, but of course we see our ethics way more in when do we start clinical trials. So how do we gather our preclinical work? Because you can cut a lot of corners and make it look like you're doing the right thing, but we deliberately choose to do more of the preclinical work before going to clinical, since it is so risky to go to a patient and not have the right results from, in our case, our robot, but I think that goes for every medical device out there.
Definitely.
And it is really good if people consider that before putting their product on the market just to make money.
Yeah, I see Jasmijn nodding, because that's a topic that's relevant for you, obviously, as well.
Definitely, yeah. And something that we get a lot is that when you say artificial womb, people think that you want to start growing from the egg to a baby. That is not what we're doing, because we're trying to improve the current healthcare. But that is something that would raise a lot of ethical questions. But then again, I come back to your point that the world is changing and laws are changing. For example, if you look at in vitro fertilization, I looked it up after our prep. It was in 1978 that they discovered it, which is quite recent. And if you look at the world today, everybody almost knows somebody who has been in contact or has used that. Mm-hmm. And it's so normal now. So what is ethical and what isn't, it's actually something that is written in laws and regulations for medical device with clinical trials, but it's also something that society thinks of.
Definitely, yeah.
So I find it very interesting to think about this. We want to prepare the society for what is coming up in technology. But I think our biggest challenge here still lies in the technology itself, because it's so complex. but nevertheless, a relevant topic indeed.
Yeah. This is like a parallel process that has to be going on. So the very practical aspect, so the baby is within the womb of the mother, and then at a certain point, the baby needs to be transferred.
Yes.
So how's this going?
Actually, our partner in Aachen, they are developing the prototype itself, where the baby is put under water, so to say, to prevent the breathing. But in Eindhoven, they are working on a transfer device where, and also a platform where you can do the canalization, which means that after the baby is either by C-section or natural birth, it's born. You cut the umbilical cord and you need to be quick. 3 minutes, that's what the doctors have, to connect the baby's umbilical cord with the artificial placenta. And the artificial placenta, something that Aachen is also working on, it will provide blood that has nutrition and oxygen. And it's quite tricky to get that right in 3 minutes because it's so tiny. And there's the reflex of the veins, for example, to become even tighter when you cut the umbilical cord. So actually, this is one of the technical issues that we are now trying to work out, how to do that. But even such a small thing, it's a big challenge.
Oh, you mentioning a Moonshot project, but it's like trying to get to Mars. It's a huge challenge indeed. Yeah, but what keeps you going? Like every now and then you should succeed at several aspects, obviously.
Yeah, well, there are so many different aspects and we have a lot of partners working on that. And we have a planning together with deadlines. And it's very motivating to see every part being developed and making the pieces fit together. So it does feel it's a very nice consortium to work in. I know the academic world, I'm not from there, and it's quite a difficult one. It can be quite competitive. But I have the feeling that within our team, we are really working together to reach this Moonshot project. So I think that's what keeps us all going.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. So Bram, you're working on your technology, and the one thing you said, because you worked in several other positions as the engineer, but now you manage people as well. Is that something you see in the field, that there's more, like Jasmijn is saying, there's more collaboration, like between the surgeons or other parties that have to deliver aspects of the robots? Is it becoming more and more open because it's such
that last part, I don't know, but because I haven't worked in medical before. But I definitely see the difference between pure technology and technology combined with medicine. Because in the medical world, of course, you're not the expert. Well, I'm not the expert, I should say. I'm an engineer. I make things that are technical and that I fully understand how they work. But if it comes to combining that with the human body and healthcare, it becomes so far out of my field that I can't really answer the questions anymore. So I need the experts to give me hints on where I need to go, and then I can propose something. But definitely managing those kind of interactions is a real challenge, because we don't speak the medical language, and medical people don't speak the engineering languages. So it becomes kind of you need to bridge the gap. It becomes very hard to communicate well and to make sure that everyone is on the same page.
And it actually takes two to tango. In the previous episode we did, episode number 2, we already spoke about there should be a benefit for the patient, but also if you implement new stuff, then it went from your hospital will be your living room in the near future. But then the specialist in the hospitals should update themselves as well and should invite new technologies. Is this happening, Roel, within the hospitals?
Yes, it's a kind of a iteration, a kind of a collaboration between both. I mean, if we keep talking to each other and they give some ideas, we have some ideas, other people have some ideas, and so you make further steps. And when you keep talking to each other, I think many solutions can be found.
Yeah. Looking back yet again to the statement, your next doctor will be a robot. Did you change your opinion during the last half hour?
No, I have thought about it a lot, and I think your next doctor will be a doctor, a human doctor, he will be ultimately responsible for your healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
But I think robots will play an important role in your healthcare, in your stay in the hospital, like Bram is saying, or you will be saying. But in the end, I think a gynecologist will say, well, you have a lovely daughter.
But maybe if it takes years and years, I'm in my early 30s, if I keep track of my health and I stay out of the hospital for 30 or 35 years, touch wood, if I'm very lucky, but maybe by that term, 30 years in the future.
That I think you should ask people that. The people have to undergo their treatment. Mm-hmm. And if people change in 30 years, then you might have a case.
You mean whether they allow it to be a robot?
Yes.
And if they still persist on it being a human being?
Well, whether they will trust a robot with those kind of talks, or that they just want to have this person they trust to tell them, you are doing a good job. I think as long as people are still psychologically dependent on the other people and how they feel, then that will be the most important thing.
Yeah, so that's actually a very important aspect you're mentioning right now, while we're nearing the finish line of this very conversation, is that safety and being heard, being seen by a doctor. That's a very important aspect as well for patients.
That's why you also have to involve patient organizations in these type of developments.
Yeah. Also a good thing to bring to the table. Bram, what about you? Did you change your opinion?
No, I did not change my opinion.
Even though if we have the scope way longer, we were talking about 25 years, 30 years.
If you're looking into the future that far, but your statement was your next doctor, but still. If you look into the future with 30 years, then of course computers will be much, much better than humans. So it's not even a competition. A 1,000 euro computer will probably have the same capacity as all the humans in the world together. So it's not a fair competition at this point, assuming Moore's law, of course. But that is so far into the future that is, first of all, not my next doctor. But second, we can't really see whether that is actually going to happen or whether something completely different is on our path by then.
Would you personally let yourself be treated by a robot?
I actually worked with one of the, not the Pepper robot, but a similar robot, and I find it very entertaining. So I find them better than the normal hospital personnel because they have more time for you. They have infinite time. They are also infinitely friendly. And that makes for a whole different interaction. Of course, I also interact with computers quite a lot, so I have no problem telling my screen what to do. Yeah, so I think that's, for me, it's definitely not a problem to get treated by a robot. Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Bram. And Jasmijn, you were the only one who agreed. Your next doctor, well, maybe in the far, far future.
I still agree.
Yeah.
And that's also maybe about the trust. I like that you mentioned that, because if you say, who do you trust more? A human with errors or a computer? Of course, they are a bit rigid sometimes. But I'd like to stick to my point. Yeah.
But me personally, I do not often visit hospitals, but I get a little bit anxiety in my belly if there should be purely robots greeting me and doing my surgery and all of that. So I'm not too sure yet, but I think we're evolving slowly but surely, and these friendly robots should be there as well to get used to in the first place, I guess.
Yes, because also not every healthcare professional that you have even have the same relationship with as another one. I mean, there may be differences there too.
Yeah.
You trust a certain doctor, but another one you don't trust.
Yeah.
And that's also a psychological thing.
So should we then give the Pepper Personalisation a personal character and personal outings that you can connect to?
Absolutely. Robots should have a kind of a personality that fits to the person that they are caring for. So you have different robots with different characters. Some are a bit grumpy, and some are always friendly, and some people like
either one of them.
Yeah, either one of them.
Yeah. Maybe for now we can agree on first asking my parents kindly to test the robots out on them, with the Pepper robot included, and then see how they react on it. And then maybe afterwards I feel myself comfortable to follow suit. All right. It's a wrap. You've listened to Building the Future, a podcast by Kadans Science Partner. And thanks to our guests, Bram de Beer from Eindhoven Medical Robotics, Jasmijn Kok from Juno Perinatal Healthcare, and Roel Boumans from Behavioral Science Institute, the BSI, from Radboud University. This episode was recorded in a building from Kadans Science Partner at the Novio Tech campus in Nijmegen, the hotspot for health and high-tech. Thanks to all of you. If you want to find out more about this podcast or our guests, go to kadans.com/podcast. Here you'll also learn more about Kadans Science Partner and how it connects innovative organizations and ecosystems throughout Europe, helping them to work on sustainable solutions for the future. And do not forget to subscribe to this podcast in your favorite app so you won't miss our upcoming episodes. Thanks for listening, and my name is Rudy van Beurden.